Good evening. Are you ready, Amanda? I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, September 14th, 2021 meeting of the Onalaska Common Council. The time is 7 p.m. Could we have the roll, please?
Mayor Kim Smith,
Here.
Tom Smith,
Here.
Dan Stevens,
Present.
Jim Olson,
Here.
Carrie Burmaster,
Here.
Diane Wolf, Stephen Knott, absent. Okay, arriving shortly. Okay.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 3 is the rules of the City of Onalaska Common Council and its subcommittees, harassment-free forum. The City Council and subcommittee meetings shall be conducted in a courteous manner. Citizens, council, and committee members shall be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free of slander, insults, obscene remarks, threats of violence, or for the use of council or committee as a forum for politics. Sufficient warnings may be given by the Sergeant at Arms at any time during the remarks, and in the event that any individual shall violate the rules of decorum heretofore set forth, such person may then be cut off from comment or debate. Item 3, public input. If you'd like to address the Common Council this evening, now is the time to do so. Please state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes per individual. Would anyone like to address the Common Council this evening? Second call, if anyone would like to address the Onalaska Common Council this evening for public input. Amanda, do you see anyone online? Third and final call to address the Common Council. Public input is now closed. Recommendation for approval and/or possible action from the following committees, commissions, or boards. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests removal, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in the order of business in the non-consent agenda. Is there any items the councilors would like removed from the consent agenda? Alder Stevens?
Thank you, Your Honor. I will need to have item H under the administrative committee removed.
Thank you. Are there any other items the councilors would like removed from the consent agenda? I'd like to consider a motion regarding the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
A second.
Motion by Alder Stevens, second by Alder Burmaster to approve the consent agenda. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Under the non-consent agenda, item 6, recap of items pulled from the consent agenda. We have one item. It is the item administrative committee item H. We'll address this committee at this item at this time. Alder Stevens.
Thank you again, Your Honor. I'm asked to have this removed for the sole purpose so I could abstain from this item as I have a personal interest in it. This is for the approval of the amplified device permit for the Onalaska Art Keepers for Saturday, October 9th at Dash Park.
Thank you. It was a recommendation of the committee to approve. Do we have a motion of that at this time?
I will make a motion to approve the amplified device permit for the Onalaska Art Keepers.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Alder Burmaster, seconded by Alder Smith to approve the amplified device permit for the Onalaska Art Keepers. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
Abstain.
One abstention. Okay, so that's 4 in favor, 0 against with 1 abstention. The motion passes. Thank you. Okay, now we're on item 7, Finance Committee. Turn it over to Alder Wolf.
Your Honor. Item 7A vouchers, a total of $2,333,140.59 was expended since the last common council meeting dated August 10th, 2021. So I move that we approve the aforementioned amount.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor by Alder Wolf, seconded by Alder Smith to approve the vouchers. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 8, Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Your Honor. Item 8A, approval of wage and salary administration policy update. It was the recommendation at F&P to approve the wage and salary administration policy update. So I will move that we do approve that this evening.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Alder Wolf, seconded by Alder Olson to approve the wage and salary administration policy update. Is there any discussion? Alder Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to call attention on page 13 of the agenda under wage and salary administration, specifically under adjustments to pay ranges. What kind of struck me is appears that there's maybe a little bit of a lack of transparency. If there are certain adjustments to be made, which could be made in the salaries to staff partway through the year or at any time, it says that the council president and the F&P chair would get notice. I'd like to understand why 2/3 of council would be omitted from this. I mean, I guess we could hear from the F&P chair or the council president, but it actually doesn't stipulate that. And if there are changes to the amount of remuneration made halfway through, that strikes me that that would have an effect on the budget. So I don't have a problem with making changes as needed partway through the year, but it just strikes me that this is something that should probably be ratified from council as a whole.
Thank you. Alder Burmaster.
And I just want to address that same item you're talking about there. And I think right now, I think what we're talking about, is something different than maybe something in the future would be. But I think right now what's happening is they're reviewing all of those job descriptions that we have incorporated now. And we have brought forth the wage study, but now they're doing the internal review of everything. And there is maybe some omissions or things that were missed that need to be corrected. And they have to be corrected. It's not something that, they can't do anything with. So I think that's a different animal than saying we're going to go ahead and change somebody else just for a specific different reason. So I think there's two different things going on, and I would be comfortable, and maybe for all of those changes like that, where you're talking about contacting, F&P chair and council president, maybe what could happen is we could just get a memo out to the council, just listing the changes that were made. And then if you needed any further explanation of that, we could certainly meet with, either HR or the city administrator to get more details on this if we had any questions or things like that. And I don't know if you'd be more comfortable with something like that, because I do agree everybody needs to be notified. I feel better that everybody gets notified at the same time, because I hate having, somebody notified and then maybe a week later somebody gets it, or a week after that somebody gets it. So I think it would be a lot cleaner if everybody got the notification at the same time.
Administrator Reinflush.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with that statement, Gary, that I had mentioned. A notification going out to everybody at a timely fashion, I think, makes the most sense as those adjustments made. The important thing to understand is equity increases are something different than changes made for other purposes. Equity increases are positions identified within the comp plan that may be inappropriately scored, or errors or omissions have scored that need to be adjusted appropriately. It has nothing to do with anything else outside of, an errors made. We need to change that effectively so it doesn't continue to be made over time that way. They should be rare adjustments. We're not talking about reclassifications. Those would have to come to council as we, talk about anyway. Reorgs have to come to council. That's not an equity increase. That is an equity increase is making sure that everyone is across the organization compensated in a fair and just manner. So it should be rare. If we're doing our job right, it would be a very rare occurrence. But it's also probably a sensitive issue, especially for those employees, that we probably don't want to necessarily broadcast to everybody, that we want to deal with in appropriate fashion and then immediately communicate out to you all. And I'm quite comfortable doing so in a memo fashion because, again, as Danny had pointed out, it is the council's budget. You should be notified of that. And I'm quite comfortable doing so in memo fashion immediately.
Alder Smith?
I just like to say, I agree with Carrie and Dan. I think the council does need to be aware of it. 'Cause when I first read it, I had the first concern as well, where is the council? We really do need to control and have an understanding of the bigger picture. So, and as long as we can have timely communications on these situations and that we're not excluded from any of the communication or it's after the fact, I can support that.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Alder Wolf?
Thank you, Your Honor. So Eric, if I hear you correct, for example, the reclassification that went through at F&P and consent agenda earlier this evening, that will still come before F&P. Thank you. And I do agree with all the previous speakers earlier this evening. So we talked at length about notification and how that would work. So do we need to adjust the paragraph in some way? Because right now, thank you, that's all I have.
Eric?
At the minimum is what's listed in the policy that notification would be made to F&P chair and common council president. My commitment is to communicate to all of my supervisors and to the mayor regarding those issues that way. But if I got hit by that bus and you have a new administrator there, the minimum is what person's going to follow. So I would recommend making the amendment to be in line with what your desires are.
Okay, anyone else? So do you want to change the wording then? Or leave the wording? Alder Wolf?
If I have a kind of a nonverbal consensus from everyone, can we just possibly, both of those paragraphs, they end with notification made to the finance and personnel, F&P chair and council president. Can't we just say to the
Common
council?
council, yeah.
Yes.
Common council.
Okay, I before I went ahead and made my motion,
Good idea.
I didn't want to backtrack, so, or just for brevity purposes. So I will move that the two paragraphs, the second and third paragraph under adjustments to pay ranges, that it ends with notification made to council, period.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, so we need to make an amendment.
I'm sorry, that was my amendment.
Amendment.
I'll second that.
So we have an amendment made by Alder Wolf, seconded by Alder Burmaster to change the wording on page 13, the two paragraphs, the one word starts with equity of the second to the last paragraph, and then the other one starts with temporary adjustments, to change the wording to just say common council. That's what the amendment is. All those, is there further discussion on that amendment? Alder Stevens.
I'm just trying to digest this here for a little bit. In the event that there are adjustments that council doesn't agree with, do we have any means to address that in this?
It's called a budget.
Okay, we'll let Administrator Reinflush address that.
To a large degree, Alder Alton is correct. I mean, any changes still have to fit within the budget. So if there's a substantial increase, which these equity increases would not be substantial, I don't really think in most cases. But if there are some substantial, it still has to fit within the budget unless we come to you to make a budget adjustments for that purpose.
My view is, I think if there's just cause or there's a need, I think our council has been very overall amenable to trying to make things right with staff and compensation. And I generally like to try to make it so the administrator and the staff have as easy of a time as possible putting stuff into motion, and that council kind of doesn't get in the way, but at the same time, we shouldn't be in the dark and we shouldn't be completely removed from the process. So I guess as long as we can address that later, then I'm okay with that.
Alder Wolf,
Thank you. So
we're discussing the amendment.
right, well, and I'm also kind of a spit off from the discussion regarding the discussion of the amendment. I heard Alder Olson talk about that we could address that at the next budget time. I heard our city administrator follow up with that. I'm trying to read what you had said because it's so hard to understand you on that spot right there. Is it, if it's, say if council were to disagree with whether it's a temporary adjustment or equity increase, or say if it's an equity increase, and we don't agree, are you saying that we would be able to take that away at the next budget? I mean, because I heard you say more that if it was large, if it's larger or something.
Perhaps it's best to identify what equity change would be. In theory, if you had 3 employees amongst 3 different departments doing substantially the same job as per the review, 2 of those are at 1 grade and 1 is at a different grade, you don't really have a choice on the 3rd grade to make that adjustment. So you have to identify why you're not making that. As Olson pointed out, you're in charge of the budget. And so if we have to make that adjustment for, say, liability purposes, we got to find a way to make it fit. And if we can't make it fit, we got to come back to council and ask for ways of making it fit, because you control the purse strings that way. So no, it's not reversing that necessarily, because you'd be willingly going and going against, exposing yourself to liability and that theoretical example. But that's what equity change is. That's why they're rare. That's why it's sensitive to employees' issues, and that's why the changes should be made quickly when that is identified as a problematic. That's a liability issue for the city, and then we'll have to make adjustments if need be. But one doesn't really have the authority to make the adjustments on an aggrieved party.
Thank you for that, Eric. Okay, so we're voting on the amendment or discussing the amendment. Is there any more discussion on the amendment? Okay, so the amendment was to change the wording on those 2 paragraphs. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. So the amendment passes unanimously. Now we're back to the original motion to approve the wage and salary administration policy upgrade as we amended it. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. I think this will be a good tool for staff going forward, so they have clear guidelines. I put it back to you, Alder Wolf.
Thank you. Gotta find my place again, sorry. Date.
8B.
8B, approval of performance evaluation policy update. It was passed at F&P, so I will move that we approve the performance evaluation policy update.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Alder Wolf, seconded by Alder Smith, to approve the performance evaluation policy update. Is there discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 9 is a report from the city attorney regarding the high voltage easement clarification. Our attorney, Amanda Jackson.
Hi, yeah, I apologize for the delay of this item, but by the time it made it to us, it was the end of last week. And so we did get a request for a clarification of a high voltage easement located near one of our stormwater ponds, and Jared can probably better explain where it's located than I can. But my understanding is basically right now there's essentially 2 poles there. They're looking to make it a single steel monopole that will hold multiple lines. And I did review the entire thing with Assistant City Engineer Kevin Schubert, and we in general don't have any issues with it. There are a couple options that you can check at the end. We would like notice if they're going to give consent, if they're going to be on and off there, mostly just so that we know they're going to be there. But the engineering department supports this, provided, I think to quote Jared, they don't fill in our stormwater pond. So if we were to not accept this, essentially they would have to go through the condemnation process. And so that is kind of their incentive to give us a monetary amount of money in order to expedite the process.
So what action are you looking for tonight?
Approval of the clarification easement.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the committee?
I move that we approve the high voltage easement as presented this evening.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Alder Wolf, seconded by Alder Olson to approve the high voltage easement as presented. Under discussion, Jared Holter, city engineer.
Just to clarify, this is at the along East Avenue in the Oak Park subdivision, so just this side of from Sand Lake Road, it's a retaining area, water area that we have right along East Avenue. The slope goes up and the poles are actually sit uphill of the ponding area. They're not even in the ponding area, so it's on extra land that we have there, so it should not cause any concerns with the function of it as a stormwater retention area.
Thank you. Any other comments?
That's the one by
Alder Smith?
Century Place, right? Just the other side of Century Place.
It's on the east side of East Avenue. So
Side of it. Okay.
east side. So as you're coming up and there's the four streets that are in a row,
Yeah,
it's just past that on the east
got it.
side.
Okay,
Right-hand side as you're heading north.
thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, the motion on the floor is to approve the high voltage easement as described. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 10 is regarding closed session. To consider a motion to convene in closed session under section 19.85, paragraph 1, paragraph G of the Wisconsin statutes for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. Specifically, a notice of circumstances regarding properties located at 1104, 1114, 1124, 1126 Wells Street. Notice of circumstance and claim for flood damage at 142 Fairway Court. And notice of circumstance and claim for flood and rain damage at 2261 Quarry Lane. If any action is required in open session as a result of the closed session, the council will reconvene in open session to take the necessary action and or continue on with the printed agenda.
Motion to go into closed.
Second.
We have a motion by Jim Olson, seconded by Carrie Burmaster to go into closed session. Voting will be by roll call.
Dan Stevens,
Aye.
Jim Olson,
Aye.
Tom Smith,
Aye.
Diane Wolf,
Aye.
Carrie Burmaster.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. We are in closed session. The time